But the product, the whole idea behind what builds this, what I'm arguing to you is the number one thing that builds this is risk. It's a group of people willing to spend time and money in hopes someday someone will buy this. And in markets like this, they're doing it under the most difficult circumstances because at the same time, there's 20 other companies doing the same thing. And they're betting on whether or not they can make a very small amount of money on each of these. And people tend to think that they make a fortune on these. They don't. They do not make big money on these because they're so competitive, because the costs are so high. That it so much goes in development of this. Cars are the one I know the best. That in this day and age, bringing a general market vehicle to the public. So a Ford F-150 pickup truck. For Ford to say, we're going to design a new one from the ground up. It's time for a whole new one, not just facelift, whatever. To bring a new vehicle to market costs over $100 million. Because I just can't even imagine what the monthly salary cost is of the engineers involved in developing a vehicle. Mind-boggling. $1 million a month is not out of the question in trying to bring that in. Plus, you've got all the materials development. Plus, you're trying to make something that when you sell the very first one, you're going to guarantee that it will go. Today with cars, we expect them to go 150,000 miles. Almost every car on the road today can be trusted to reasonably reliably go 150,000 miles. How many cars do you think they will have taken to 150,000 miles by the time you buy one? Almost none. They will have rapidly done it, and they have ways, and they've developed over time, ways to go and make 10 years worth of life happen to a vehicle in 50 days or 100 days. They blast them with sunlight and they blast them with water and they shake them like crazy. The proving grounds for the manufacturers have the world's roughest roads, things like that. It's because what they're trying to do is they're trying to speed the whole process up, and they're trying to break everything that you can break. And they're spending all of this money on it, and a large percentage of cars don't end up making the money. We end up deciding we just don't like it. They're trying to predict, they're having to design today a car that we think is going to look cool 5 years from now. Because if they're not designing it now, it won't be ready in time. That's what makes value. Value is this game of trying to figure out what somebody is willing to part with dollars for. Okay? Employees. So we have this thing right now that says employees are the biggest piece. The socialists think that the employee is the biggest piece of this. There is a reason why socialist countries do not develop things like this. China is not the world's great developer of new products. China, Russia, go back to the Soviet Union, are the classic all-time thieves. That's how they do it. Okay? They don't believe in intellectual property. They don't believe you can own an idea. So what they do is they wait till somebody else goes through the trouble of proving an idea, and then they steal it. They take this, they take it to China, they send somebody here, they buy one of these, they go to China, and they disassemble it, and then they copy it, often not even knowing how it works. But tell me right now, what was the last great invention China brought to the world? What?
Hoverboards.
Hoverboards. Actually, hoverboards are a great example. Hoverboards are a Chinese invention. It's an interesting story because if you go back a few years ago to the Christmas at which hoverboards first came out, it's the little two-wheel rolly things. What they are is a Segway with no handle, because that's the technology that was stolen in this. Was the idea of self-balancing wheel-driven system, so for mobility. And Segway is actually the developer of the original idea. The only thing the hoverboard has is size. It's pared it down to the smallest size and got rid of the handle, so it involves some balance and stuff. The interesting thing is it was a Chinese guy who has that idea of a toy version of this that we know of as the hoverboard. The interesting thing is I think of all manufacturers in China, the only one that never produced a hoverboard that Christmas was the guy who invented it. Because the problem was, as the story goes, is he was short on some, like most people have ideas, he was short on some of the things it took to put it together. So he needed somebody who could put together the motors and somebody who could put together the circuitry and those sorts of things. He had the idea, he was bringing it together in the middle. The problem was, this is China. So every company he worked with along the way stole the whole idea from him. It's always the problem when you're developing a new product is when you need help, very often the people you have to ask for help from are the people most capable of stealing your idea. Because the reason you're talking to them is they can do things you can't. So most of us in America, we protect ourselves. We protect ourselves with agreements that say, I need to ask you a question, but for me to ask this question, you need to sign this saying, you heard from me about my product today, so that I can prove in court later if you show up with the same product that it was really mine first. Okay? So we have non-disclosure and non-competes and these sorts of things. But China doesn't care about any of that. And so, as this guy went through the process, it got literally stolen by everybody. So the very first year, the biggest problem they had with them is you couldn't tell a good one from a bad one because there were no name brands behind them. This was not a product brought out by Sony or some major electronics company. They were just 100 different ones on the market by 100 different companies you've never heard of. And some of them went about building them the right way, and many of them went about doing everything on the cheap as fast as they could, which meant that they were using faulty wiring. Wiring was the biggest problem with them. Is you could save money by using a thinner gauge of wire in them, but the amount of power you're running through them meant you overheated the wires, which meant that they burst into flames. And they were using questionable battery connections and things, so pretty soon the airlines wouldn't let you fly them any place. A lot of the shipping companies wouldn't let you ship them. And all of that because you didn't go, it's the weird one, you didn't go, well, why don't they just recall them? Who recalled them? Who are these companies? Nobody even knows who they are. That's the difference. That's how ideas happen in a country that has no sense of property. We are a country built on property. In a country that's communist, they don't believe in any private property. So if you can't own the land your house is on, you can't own an idea that's in your head either. It's all for the collective good of everybody. And so what happens is nobody invents anything because there's no reason to take the risk if there's no reward for it. The guy who invented the hoverboard got no payoff on it. He eventually knew he was so far behind all these companies that were stealing from him, he just quit. Okay? So having the idea didn't pay off. But that's the whole idea is we're talking about countries where very few ideas come out of them and never have. If you go back, go the Soviet Union, it's great. Go back and you can find, because they're open now, Russia's much more open today, you can find lots of documentaries of things like their fake space shuttle. They tried to copy the most complex mechanical device ever created by human beings, which was the space shuttle. And they have a space shuttle. And guess what it looks like? It looks just like our space shuttle. Guess how many times it flew? 0 times. Because it never worked. Because it was too complex to do it backwards. It was too complex to go, okay, we'll just make the thing look like this and hope it works. Because what's the chances of you just copying this stuff and the insides work? If you don't know how they work, just making it look like it often doesn't work anymore, not in this world. And the space shuttle was far too complex to recreate without the predicate knowledge that went into it.